One of my daughters asked me to tuck her in and read her a bedtime story. Okay. Appalachian humor. Loyal Jones. A good laugh is better than a dose of salts. Granny Morgan. Everything human is pathetic. The secret source of humor itself is not joy but sorrow. Mark Twain. Nowhere else in the country is the tragic view of the human condition so engrazed as the South in general and the Appalachians in particular. Perhaps this is because we are closer to chauvinism than any other people. By chauvinism, I mean the system of theological thought that perceives human persons as flawed, unable to extract themselves from their own fleshly pursuits without the grace of God, that God alone decides who will be saved and who will not, and that there is nothing we can do about it, that the God who elects some of us to glory will keep us until the end, and that elected believers are equal. It is a grim system, but it has its attributes. Chauvinists are rarely surprised, almost never astonished at our capacity to invent evil, and quite often are pleasantly surprised that we are better than expected. It is certainly true that the more optimistic gospel of the Methodists and other permeated the religions of the South, and many of us have tried to get the hang of perfectionism. We believe in God. We try to believe in goodness and perfectibility, but underneath is the fear that we are going it alone in the world and getting flogged, unreliable, and absurd, pretending that we are worthy and in control. Yet we know that our dignity is too small hat in the winds of truth. All people know this, but here in this religion, we keep it uppermost in our minds, so that the only reasonable thing to do about it is to laugh at ourselves, at others who pretend, against odds, that all is well with the human enterprise. It is easy to believe that such a view of life is passing from the American scene with the family farm, that abundances would not be hounded by such. Yet recently, in an interview by the Saturday Review, Mark Zussman wrote, "The world is more or less as it must be, and the mature person approaches it with compassion, to be sure, but also with irony. The mature person saves some compassion and almost of the irony or humor for himself. This mature sense of things is a modest view, such as a person's humor is depreciating. It is also aimed at those who pretend to be what they are not, nor can be. Such a humor helps to create a proper perspective. It allows to cope in a life that is often baffling and disappointing. It also comes from a defiant as well as a humble heart. No one can evade disaster and death, but we can escape the degradation of dreading and fearing the inevitable in itself in a victory. Here in Appalachia, we have seen our loved ones die in hazardous occupations from unchecked diseases. We've been built of land, materials, and ballards. We have been gerrymandered, lied to, and done unto, but we have endured, partially at least, because we could laugh. There is also, of course, the light-hearted banter, the rusties, pranks that are pulled on one another in every community. There is the wag, the prankster, who lightens the day with his antics. Some of this humor has a barb in it, ruffles dignity, but most of it's gentle wit, not aimed at embarrassment. It is Surface humor, light and yet concerned with the distempers of the human spirit. Some characteristics of Southern mountaineers may be in order. Their absorption with religion has been alluded to. I've made a case for the inherent chauvinistic nature of the belief system. This is supported by the Appalachian writer and recounter Harry Caldwell, who claims that we are all Baptists. Oh, you'll find Methodists, but who claims that we are all Baptists? Oh, you'll find Methodists. If you scratch one, you'll find a Baptist underneath. Indeed, the old-time Baptist view of things does seem to explain Appalachians better than any other view. Many historians have given credit to Scotch Irish Presbyterianism, that's me, for shaping the character of those who settled the mountains. But Presbyterians tend to be middle class and somewhat aloof of the common folks. Baptist theology attracts ordinary people, reinforces the leveling tendencies mountaineers, and supports their basic radicalism. It seeps into the core, as Caldwell suggests. I heard one fellow saying, "I used to be a Baptist." Another answered, "There's no such thing as an ex-Baptist." There are probably more jokes about religion in the mountains than there are any other subject. Why is this? In some parts of the country, people are afraid to make jokes about religion because they might be perceived as sacrilegious. Here, even the preachers tell jokes about their foibles and the inconsistencies of the church. Perhaps it is because they have not been overly imbued with the perfectionist zeal. They see and comment on follies, even religious ones. A well-known story is this. A good sister in the balcony of a church got happy and began to dance a little. She lost her balance and fell. However, her dress tail caught on the hanging light fixture, leaving her safely suspended but somewhat exposed. The preacher, thinking quickly, shouted, "The first man that looks upon this good Christian woman will be struck stone blind." There was a long pause, and then came a hoarse whisper from a man down front. "I think I'll risk one eye." Modesty, already mentioned, is rooted in the idea of not taking oneself too seriously. Mountaineers are levelers, believing that each is as good as another, but no better. Such people are quick to note tendencies in themselves for pretending to be what they are not, and they make a joke about it. They're even quicker to note the tendency in others. Again, the joke, or quip, as when my friend from West Jefferson, North Carolina called, "With whom did you wish to speak?" I inquired with English teacher stiffness. "You, the stuffy bastard," he responded. Mountain politicians are hesitant to claim too much in the way of talent and ideals. They walk a thin line between modesty and affirmation of ability to do the job at hand. The rural votes love the official who can tell stories of himself, who doesn't get above his raising. The best story to illustrate these qualities was told by Fess Whitaker of Letcher County, Kentucky, when he campaigned for jailer of the county. "You know, I was in Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. I rode with him in the Battle of San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War. I remember that day as if it was yesterday. Teddy and I rode stirrup on stirrup, our guns blazing and our sabers flashing in the sun, while off before us the Spaniards fled in a great cloud of dust. When we reached the top, Teddy reined up and said, 'We're done. We've done a great thing here today. Fess and one of us are going to be president.' 'You just go ahead, tell Teddy,' I said. All I want is to be jailer of Letcher County." Almost a contradiction of the value of modesty is the mountaineer's sense of independence and self-reliance, reinforced by a stubborn pride. These traits are illustrated by the following anecdote said to be true. Several years ago, there was a great snowfall in western North Carolina, and many people were snowed in for weeks. The Red Cross came to help. Two workers heard of an old lady way back in the mountains living alone, and they set out to see about her in a four-wheel drive vehicle. They finally slipped and skidded over the mountains and got into the high cove where she lived and got out and knocked on her door. When she appeared at the door, one of the workers said, "Hello, we're from the Red Cross." Before they could say anything else, she replied, "Well, I don't believe I'm going to be able to help you any. It's been a right hard winter." Personalism is another trait of Appalachians. This means we think in terms of persons rather than degrees or professional reputations. We want to get you placed to see which Johnson you are. So we ask, "Whose boy are you? Are you from the Horse Hollow Johnsons? Do I know your daddy? Are you Johnsons, the free fell on?" We tend to get sidetracked from abstract discourses if we have a good excuse to go off on a tangent and tell about some interesting person who may or may not be closely related to the discourse. Jeff Daniel Marion, the East Tennessee poet, captures this tendency with a poem in a southern direction, a response to someone asking for directions. "It's just over the knob, there. You know the place, the one up there next to Maluya Justice, your mother's second cousin on her daddy's side, or you go in by the back road. It's the farm across the way from Jesse's old barn that burned down last June with them two fine mules of his. Why, hell, son, you can't miss it." The late Joe Creason, who wrote a column for the Louisville Courier-Journal, used to tell a story about his visit with a man on Pike County, Kentucky. They exchanged howdies and commented on weather, and then the man asked, "Where are you from?" Creason told him he was from Louisville. There was a long pause, and then the man asked, "Who's the barber up there now?" The world of the traditional Appalachian is a warm one of persons that one knows or would like to know. Appalachians have known more poverty and over long periods than have most Americans. Therefore, hard time, jokes, and illusions are part of the fabric of life. The legendary invitations to hospitality were usually qualified with something like, "If you don't mind me saying, staying with poor folks. My father told me being invited to dinner with a family who had only sorghum and cornbread, but with the host graciously inviting them, just reach and get anything you want. My father overdid it with the sorghum." The hostess, seeing his plight, offered to wash his plate for him. Expecting another dish, he complied, but when she returned the plate, nothing else was put on the table. When asked what he would like to have now, he replied, "I guess some more sorghum." William Score Coleman, and banker from Hazard, Kentucky, told the story about a woman going to see the governor about getting her husband out of the penitentiary. "What's he in for?" the governor wanted to know. "For stealing a ham?" "That doesn't sound too bad. Is he a good worker?" "No, I wouldn't say that. He's pretty lazy." "Oh, well, he's good to you and the children, isn't he?" "No, he's not. He's pretty mean to us, if you want to know the truth." "Why would you want a man like that out of prison?" "Well, Governor, we're out of ham." One place named Gnawbone, indicating that the people had to get every bit of nourishment they could from the food they had available. The place names of mountains certain a great deal of humor and irony. Consider hell for starting, beauty. Lovely, Sodom, Gizzard, Matrimony, Affinity, Bulltown, Only, Possum, very dear to mountain people. One fellow said he lived so far back in the hills, the sun set between his house and the main road. Family is the functional unit of the mountains. It is the extending far-flung made up of the individuals of diverse dispositions, but held together by affection, obligation, and tradition. One wag comment, mountaineers do unto them, do-gooders, professors, and the like who came to study, mountaineers do unto them, commented the typical mountain family is made up of a father, mother, 6 children, 4 grandparents, a bunch of aunts, uncles, cousins, sociologists, and a family planning specialist. One brother said to another, "You know, I've decided that Uncle Herman is a real SOB." The other considered this for a moment and replied, "Yeah, but he's our'n." Perhaps this attitude spawned the phrase, "good old boy," one might say. Jess is a good old boy, even though he drinks, beats his horse, or whatever. It is tolerant acceptance of kin, wants, and all. They are family. They can expect support when they need it. My kinfolks represent generations of North Carolina mountaineers, a mixture of Welsh, Scotch-Irish, English, and Dutch, or German. Stock Baptist to the core. They did the best they could and then stood and took it. Grandpa Jones, a farmer and storekeeper, and Grandpa Morgan, a Baptist preacher, farmer, were both endowed with fiery Celtic tempers. Grandpa Jones was turned out of the church for fighting with his son-in-law over politics. It was said that they tore down the half-acre of corn, holding hands and kicking each other's tails in merriment go-around of reputation and retribution. Grandpa was ardent Democratic, my uncle an ironclad Republican. Grandpa made terrible jokes about Hoover and the Republican Depression, asking my uncle if he knew that was against the law to shoot up into the air before 9 a.m. When Uncle said he did not, Grandpa cowered, because you might hit somebody up in the permission tree getting his breakfast. This would nudge Uncle into a bitter and vindictive mood because he was humorless when it came to politics. Grandpa Jones was a practical joker of the first water, always teasing children and leading adults into the bogs of his imagination. Grandpa Morgan preached fiery sermons and was noted for the power of his rhetoric. He tolerated imperfections in members of his congregations until he could extort them to mend their ways, but had little patience with the errant cow or horse. He could blister the hair off the offending animal with his judgment on intrinsic worth. Humor around our house took the form of bantering, calling attention to inconsistencies and forebills. Practical jokes were in order. Gentle disparagement was used ironically, that is, really showing affection and approval, even if the words indicated otherwise, as to, "You look like the hind wheels of hard time," or "You must have been behind the door when the looks were passed out." Sometimes, though, the ridicule hurt, and when my brother's prize-fighting cock got out of the cage and was slain by my mother's Rhode Island red rooster, the threat of such ridicule kept us out of trouble at times. Sometimes I was goaded into making a bid on the hip-shot, spavined, ancient, and emaciated saddle horse, and I bid for what I thought was a safe $20, which was accepted with grateful alacrity. I fled amid derisive comments, but this was better than treatment that I would have had if I had brought that decrepit horse home. In church, we devised games to play along the long sermons. One was to read the hymn titles and add the words under the covers. Thus, we came up with such provocative and stimulating titles as Just as I Am Under the Covers, Guide Me Under the Covers. I'm a wonderful Tom under the covers. Of course, we imagined that our parents would skin us alive if they found out about our sacrilege, not knowing that they probably had played the same game in their time. It was a joy when your own children take up some of the same interests and takes of their parents. Our children like and make mountain music. They love stories and humorous anecdotes. Yet I see a hesitation, sometimes strained laugh when the old rural jokes are told. Their experience is different from ours. A generation is a long time in the 20th century. Across the country, a way of life with references to agricultural terms is passing, just as the month in the Louisville Corner Journal, a journalist, obviously urban-spalled, reported that the federal judge who grew up on the farm was trying to decide which was the easiest road to hoe. Two are options in a legal case. My friend Jim Wayne Miller, who hails from Buncombe County, North Carolina, yeah, I lived there, says that the Back to the Land movement keeps growing. We'll be having robust malpromises such as hitting the row or on the row again. All this reminds me of the stories I heard as a child of other children's misunderstanding. The words to hymns, for example, one boy's fondness for the cross-eyed bear hymn. Gladly the cross-eyed bear. And the one about round joy version. Round yon version. A great deal of humor involves misunderstanding of words as culture and experiences and interests as well as localities change. The possibility of misunderstanding increase. It is both humorous and disquieting. But life and culture and values go on, always changing, and Raymond K. McLean and Hercules say culture and tradition are like a river, which appears the same but is ever changing. No one of us can ever step into the same river twice, yet we, like a river, always have the same basic characteristics. Our atoms change, our children are different from us parents, but they are of the same genes and culture. Their tendencies and needs and desires will be similar to ours. Human nature as it is, and we must be what we are, learn to live with it. And if we are to survive, we must laugh whenever we can. All right. Good night, Bex. Okay? Sleep tight. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Now you know a little bit about where I lived. All over North Carolina. And you're from South Carolina, so there you go.